The snow came fast. One moment, his shuttle was flying smooth over the frozen valley. The next alarm screamed, metal cracked, and everything went white. Now he was here, cold, alone, half buried in snow. His name was Mason, a scout. Human, his job was to check planets before the colony ships landed. But this planet was cruel. The air was thin, the sky always dark, and the wind sharp like knives. He had crawled from the crash hours ago. The wreck was still smoking behind him, too dangerous to stay near. He had no shelter, no food, and worst of all, no signal. The radio was fried. Suit was cracked. His fingers were numb. His breath came out in little clouds that vanished too fast. And now? He couldn't move his legs. He tried again to stand, but pain exploded in his spine. He screamed, but no one answered. No one's coming. He muttered to himself. The storm grew louder. Snowflakes turned into sharp ice. His body shook harder. With each passing minute, he looked up once more, hoping to see a rescue beacon blinking in the sky. Instead, he saw something else. Footsteps, huge ones. Each print in the snow was 3 times the size of his boot. Then, thump, 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 the ground shook. A shape appeared through the falling snow. First a shadow, then a figure. Tall, no dash, massive 9 feet tall, maybe more. Broad shoulders, long white cloak flowing in the wind. The figure stepped closer, then closer again. Mason's heart raced. He reached for the tiny flare gun at his belt, but his fingers were too frozen to grab it. The giant stopped a few feet away, and then it spoke, not in English, not in any human tongue. But the voice was deep, calm, almost musical. The figure knelt. That's when Mason saw her face. She was not human. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes glowing faint blue. Her face was strong, but not harsh. She looked at him not like a hunter looks at prey, but like a person looks at something. Fragile, she reached out with one giant hand. Mason flinched, expecting pain, but instead, she touched his face softly. Warmth passed from her hand into his cheek. She said something again, her voice low, soothing. Then, without warning, she lifted him like he weighed nothing. His vision faded. His head dropped against her chest, and he blacked out. He didn't know how long he was out, but when he woke, everything was different. The cold was gone. He blinked, confused. He was lying on something soft. A bed. No, not human-made. Animal furs thick and warm. A soft light glowed from the cave walls, crystals blue and humming with energy. He smelled food. Hot food. Mason sat up slowly. His body still ached, but someone had wrapped him in bandages, carefully, gently, and across the cave. She was there, the giant woman, sitting near a small fire pit, stirring something in a metal bowl. She turned when he moved. Their eyes met. Tensed. She didn't speak, just tilted her head slightly, then smiled. A small, honest smile. Mason opened his mouth but couldn't find the right words. You? Tate. Me. She didn't answer in words. She stood, walked over, and handed him a bowl of soup. The steam warmed his face. It smelled strange but good. He took it, sipped. It was salty, thick, and unlike anything he'd ever tasted. But after hours of nothing, it felt like heaven. She sat beside him, not too close, careful not to scare him. He watched her from the corner of his eye. Her skin shimmered softly. She wore armor beneath her cloaks, cuffed and old. Her boots were metal. Her hair was braided back tightly. She looked like a warrior, but moved like a nurse. Finally, she pointed to herself. Varel, she said. Mason blinked. Varel, she nodded. He pointed to his chest. Mason, she repeated it. "Ma-san," he smiled. "Close enough." That night, as the storm howled outside the cave, Mason lay back against the fur bed and stared at the ceiling. A 9-foot alien woman had rescued him, carried him across a frozen world, and given him warmth and food without asking anything in. Returned, she could have left him to die, could have robbed him, could have eaten him, for all he knew. But instead, she took care of him better than anyone ever had, and in his chest, something strange stirred hope. Mason didn't trust his own eyes. He had been taught to fear aliens. All scouts were. Unknown species meant danger. Some shot first, some experimented, and some just watched you die. But Varel, she made soup. The thick stone cave glowed softly with blue crystals lining the walls. Warmth came not just from the fire, but from something deeper, calm, quiet energy that soaked into his skin. For the first time in days, his body relaxed. Still, questions spun in his mind. Why was she alone? Why help him, a stranger? And what was she doing before she found him? The next morning, Mason woke to the smell of something sweet. He sat up, slowly, wincing at the pain in his side. His ribs were bruised and one leg was wrapped tight. But the worst had passed. Varel stood at the far end of the cave, pouring something from a small metal pot into a carved stone cup. She moved like a soldier, strong, balanced, focused. But her actions were gentle. She looked back and saw him. Watching, she smiled. Mason raised a weak hand and waved. She walked over and handed him the cup. The drink was warm, thick, and creamy. It tasted like spiced honey mixed with roots. Strange, but comforting. He gave a small laugh. "You cook better than our ship's chef." She tilted her head at his voice, trying to understand. Then, to his surprise, she said softly, "Eat, heal." The words were broken, but they were his words. "You're learning English." Varel nodded slowly. Little, slow. "But, yes." Mason smiled. "You're doing better than I could with your language." She seemed pleased. Then she pointed at him. "Pain, still." He nodded and tapped his side. "Hurts a bit, but I'll live." Varela's smile faded slightly. She reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a small, glowing stone. She crushed it in her fingers like sand, then mixed the powder into a warm drink. "Drink," she said. He hesitated just for a second, but something in her eyes made him trust her. He drank. The hours passed. Mason couldn't walk yet. A tea could. Sit up and talk. He tried teaching her words by pointing at things: fire, stone, blanket. She repeated them with surprising accuracy. She was smart, very smart and patient. They didn't talk about where she came from, not yet. But when he asked if there were more like her, she simply shook her head and looked away. That told him enough. Later that day, when he dozed off, a loud crack startled him awake. He sat up sharply. Varel stood near the cave entrance, her back turned, spear in hand. Mason's heart jumped. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer, just raised a finger to her lips. Quiet, another crack. Snow crunching. Something was outside. She motioned for him to stay put, then stepped outside with her spear drawn. Mason held his breath. Minutes passed. Then she returned, brushing snow from her armor. "Big crawler," she said. "Left now. Tracks. Old." He let out a long breath. "You scared it off?" Varel gave a small smirk. "They fear tall shadows." Mason laughed. "I can see why." That night, the wind howled again, but inside, the cave was calm. Varel sat beside the fire, sharpening her spear with smooth, practiced movements. Mason sat near her, drawing in a small notebook he had saved from the crash. He handed her a pages sketch of her standing in the snow, holding him. She stared at it for a long time. "You draw me?" He nodded. You saved my life. I wanted to remember that? Varel looked at him, expression unreadable. Then, softly, she said, "No one. Remember me before." His chest tightened. No one. Not even her own people. She looked away and added, Not good. Not like others." "That's not true," Mason said. "You're better than anyone I've ever met." She didn't reply. But her hand, larger than his head, gently brushed his shoulder before pulling back. Before sleep, Mason looked up at the cave ceiling. The walls had carving symbols and marks, burned into the stone. He'd noticed them before, but hadn't asked. Now, he stared. One carving showed a tall figure like Varel. Kneeling, another showed her standing alone, spear raised. Others showed cities, battles, stars. This wasn't just a cave, it was a home, a memory, a hiding place, and she let him in as he drifted to sleep. One final thought circled in his tired mind. The galaxy was cold, but in the arms of a 9-foot alien warrior, he had found something warm, something rare, something that felt like kindness. The storm had passed, but the cold stayed. Inside the cave, the fire flickered low. The crystals in the walls still glowed faint blue, casting soft shadows on the stone. Mason sat with a thick fur wrapped around his shoulders, sipping another strange herbal drink. He was healing slowly. But the pain in his body wasn't what bothered him. It was the silence Val had barely spoken all morning. Her face was calm, but something behind her eyes had changed. She kept glancing toward the back of the cave. Deeper in, somewhere he had never gone, Mason noticed she was hiding something. That evening, when she left to gather firewood, Mason stood limping but steady. He waited until her footsteps faded, then followed the carvings on the cave wall. They led deeper into the shadows. The hallway narrowed. The glowing stones dimmed, but still, he pressed forward, careful not to fall. Then he saw it. A chamber, larger than the one he slept in. The walls were full of carvings, hundreds of them. Some were scratched and faded. Others were deep and sharp, like someone had cut the story into stone using their own hands. Mason walked slowly along the wall, studying each image. First, a tall warrior woman standing among other smaller aliens, many races. She stood at the front. Second, the same woman, wearing a badge or crest, something official. Third, the woman Varel kneeling, surrounded by soldiers. Shackles on her wrists. Fourth, flames. Death, her running alone into the wilderness. Mason's chest tightened. She had been someone important, respected, a leader, then betrayed, banished. He didn't hear her footsteps until she was right behind him. "You came," she said quietly. Mason turned fast. I didn't mean to." She raised one hand. "It is. Okay." Varel stepped beside him, eyes on the carvings. Her expression was distant, almost hollow. He waited, unsure if she would explain. Then she did. "My name," she began. Softly, once had weight. "I was honor guard, chosen to protect voices of peace." Mason listened, silent. "I trained since child," she said. "Tall even then, strong but heart was soft. I believed in unity, in rules, in truth." Her voice grew colder. "One day, leaders made deal. Secret, sold slaves to war clans. I spoke against it. I refused." She pointed at the carving of her kneeling. "They made me example." Mason's stomach twisted. "They exiled you." She nodded. "Took armor, took rank, took name. Left me on Ice Moon, alone." He stared at her, words stuck in his throat. She turned to him. "But I survived. Built home, and when you came, I could not watch another die." Her voice cracked on the last word. Just a little. Mason stepped closer. You saved me. After all they did to you. Varel looked at him, eyes shimmering. You were small. Hurt like I was. Mason felt something deep inside shift. She had lost everything. Her people, her honor, her voice. But she still helped him. Still gave him food, warmth, safety. You're not what they said you were, he whispered. You're... Morvera looked down at him. You do not fear me. He shook his head. You're the only reason I'm alive. Silence filled the room. Then, with slow movement, she knelt beside him. Even kneeling, she was nearly his height. I do not know why I tell you this, she said, but I am glad you listened. He smiled. Maybe you just needed someone to remember your story. Varel stared at the wall. I burned my past, she said, but maybe can still mean something. Later that night, Mason couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling. Thinking of everything she said, he imagined her standing in front of her leaders, proud and tall, refusing to follow cruel orders. He imagined the chains, the loneliness, the silence, and yet she didn't break. She didn't turn cruel, didn't become bitter. Instead, she built this place, a home. He turned his head and looked at her, resting quietly near the fire, spear close beside her. Not a monster, not a killer, but a protector, waiting for someone to believe in her again. The next morning, the sky outside was clear. A soft sun peeked through gray clouds. Mason stepped out of the cave, breathing in the sharp, fresh air. Snow stretched for miles. He looked up at the sky, wondering how far Earth was. Wondering if anyone even knew he was alive. Behind him, Varel stepped out too. She stood beside him, her giant form blocking the cold wind like a wall. You miss your people, she asked. Sometimes, he said, but they never treated me like you do. She raised a brow. I am not soft. He laughed. You're softer than you think. She looked at him. Then quietly she said, then maybe. I'm learning. The sky rumbled. Mason looked up from the fire, eyes narrowing. That wasn't thunder, no clouds. No lightning, just sound deep, steady, growing louder. Va. Rel froze. Then she whispered one word. Ships. Mason stood, heart thumping. Ships. You mean rescue? But Varel's face was hard. She shook her head slowly. Not yours. Not friendly. The sound grew sharper, closer now. Engines high-pitched, familiar but wrong. Like military tech, but not from Earth. Mason rushed outside. 3 black ships appeared through the clouds, flying low over the snowy cliffs. Sleek, fast, with blood red markings along their wings, they circled once and began to land. Right in the valley below. Mason's voice was tight. They followed your trail. Varel's jaw clenched. My kind, bounty seekers. Loyal to the old rulers. Mason turned toward her. Then we run. But she didn't move. No, they will hunt. Always. I stop them here. You want to fight? Mason said, shocked. They have guns, tech, ships. Varel picked up her spear. I have strength. I know this land. Mason grabbed her arm. We can make a plan. Hide. Use traps, anything but walking straight into them. She paused, then nodded. You think like prey? Good, help me. They moved quickly through the snowy terrain. Varel led him to narrow paths, rocky cliffs, and frozen caves. She showed him how to set traps using thin ice sheets and falling stones. Mason, using what little gear he had left, rigged up sound sensors and trip alarms. He even set an old flare charge under a snow mound, hoping it would blind the enemy. By sunset, they had turned the valley into a maze of danger. Now, they waited. The hunters came after dark. 5 of them, tall, armored, faces hidden behind breathing masks. Weapons glowing with red plasma. They moved like shadows, silent, skilled. Deadly Mason and Varel watched from a ridge above. They move like soldiers, he whispered. Varel nodded. They are. One of them stopped, scanning the ground. Mason held his breath. Suddenly, crack. Snow gave way beneath one hunter. He fell through a trap into a frozen pit. His weapon flying from his hand. Varel didn't wait. She jumped down from the ridge, landing with a loud thud. The hunters turned, weapons raised, but she was faster. Her spear spun through the air, striking one in the chest. He flew back, crashing into a stone wall. Mason grabbed a rock and smashed a signal beacon. Setting off his flare trap. Light exploded in the snow. The hunters screamed. Their visors blinded. Mason ran, pulling Varel's backup spear from the snow pile. He tossed it toward her, she caught it mid-air and charged. Forward. The fight was fast. Brutal. Varel was a blur of movement, blocking, striking, dodging. Her size gave her power, but it was her training that made her deadly. Mason used hit-and-run tactics, distracting enemies and guiding them toward traps. One slipped on a frozen slope and smashed into a tree. Another stepped into a buried net and was dragged into the air, kicking wildly. But the leader? He was different. He didn't fight like the others. He was quiet, calculated. Watching then, he spoke. Varel, he said in her native tongue. You live like an animal, hiding in caves, helping a human. Is that what you've become? Varel stood tall, panting. I became free. The leader raised his plasma blade, then die free. Their blades clashed. It was like thunder meeting. Fire. Varel fought hard, but the leader was fast. His weapon cut across her arm. Blue blood hit the snow. Mason shouted, behind you. She ducked just in time. Mason threw a flare that exploded between them. The leader stumbled. Varel roared and struck him in the chest. His armor cracked. He fell hard, not dead, but broken. The remaining 2 hunters saw their leader fall and ran. Cowards. Single quotes, REL, stood over the snow, chest rising and falling. Mason rushed to her side. You're bleeding. I've bled before. You saved me again, he said. She looked down at him. You helped. You fought with me. Mason nodded. I wasn't going to let them take you. A slow smile touched her lips. They burned the bodies that night, not out of hate, but caution. The tech could not fall into the wrong hands. Later, Mason helped wrap Varel's arm with clean bandages. You'll have a scar, he said. She smirked. Many already. He stared at the stars through the open cave mouth. They know where we are now, he said. More might come. Varel's voice was quiet. Yes, we must leave soon. Where will we go? She looked at him. Where? They cannot follow. Mason nodded. Wherever she went, he would go too, because now she wasn't just his protector, she was his friend. The fires behind them still burned as they climbed the icy ridge. The wind howled like a wild animal. Snow flew sideways. The light from the flames below flickered on the sharp cliffs like the planet itself was angry. Varel led the way, bleeding, but steady. Her tall frame moved through the storm like she belonged in it. Mason followed close behind, struggling with each step. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. The hunters were gone. For now, but more would come. He knew it, and so did she. They reached a rocky ledge and paused for breath. Below them, the land stretched. Out in jagged hills and white valleys far ahead, barely visible through the snow, was a narrow canyon. Tall rock walls, a place even scanners struggled to reach. VA pointed. Ravine of Bones, she said. Mason raised an eyebrow. That name doesn't sound very welcoming. It is not, she replied. Old place. Cursed, they say. Full of shadows. He looked at her. We're going in there. She nodded once. It is the only path they fear. Mason swallowed hard. Then I guess we better not stop. They climbed down into the canyon as the wind grew quieter. The deeper they went, the more still it became. No birds, no creatures. Not even the sound of crunching snow. Just silence. And bones, long bones, curved, broken, lying in piles along the canyon walls. Is this what I think it is? Mason whispered. VA nodded. Old battlefield, before my people ever reached the stars. He looked around nervously. What killed them? No one remembers, she said. Maybe monsters, maybe each other. Mason sighed. Great. Still, they kept moving. By nightfall, they found a small cave hidden beneath a slanted rock shelf. Varel cleared it quickly and started a small fire using dry crystal dust. Mason slumped against the wall. Exhausted. We've been walking for 12 hours, he groaned. My legs feel like jelly. You are not used to cold marches, Varel said. He looked at her, amused. You say that like it's a normal thing. She smiled faintly. Then he noticed the blood seeping through her bandages. Your arm, she shrugged. It will heal. You should rest. She hesitated. Then nodded. Only if you rest too. Later, after eating, Mason stared at the cave ceiling. He couldn't sleep. His body was still, but his mind loud. He kept seeing the hunters. The fight. Varel's spear cutting through the dark like a bolt of lightning. She was amazing. Not just strong, but fearless, and yet so gentle when she looked at him. When she spoke his name, Mason glanced over. She was asleep now, curled on her side, her large body filling nearly half the cave. Her long arms were wrapped around her spear, like a child hugging a stuffed toy. He smiled softly. Who was she, really? Beneath the armor. And what would happen if they never stopped running? By morning, the snow had stopped, but the canyon was even. Colder taut frost covered the walls. Strange black vines curled around dead trees. The bones now had icicles hanging from their ribs like sharp teeth. They walked in silence for hours. Then Varel stopped. She crouched beside a twisted skull, one unlike any Mason had seen. Long jaw, horns, thin cracks through the top. She placed one large hand gently on it. Mason watched. You knew them. Varel shook her head. No, but they were warriors. Like me. He nodded slowly. Then suddenly she stood, ears twitching. What is it? She sniffed the air. Then she spoke, voice sharp. Smoke. Mason's eyes widened. You sure? She nodded. They climbed higher along a ridge of crumbling stone. Then peered over the edge. Below, barely a kilometer away, a wrecked shuttle lay half covered in snow. Small, human design. Mason's heart leaped. Earth tech. He stood fast, but Varel grabbed his arm. Wait, could be trap. He paused. Or it could be my people. Survivors. Maybe they sent a search team. Varel didn't move. We check. Careful. They made their way down, quiet as ghosts. The shuttle was real, broken, yes, but real. The hatch was torn open and the sides were scorched like it had taken a hit mid-air. Mason climbed inside first, his breath catching. A dead body lay in the pilot's seat. Human, burned, he turned away. Too late. Varel entered behind him, ducking to fit. She scanned the walls, then pointed. A blinking light. A signal beacon still working. Mason's eyes lit up. That's a rescue call. Low band, encrypted. If a human ship passes nearby, it'll pick it up. He turned to her, grinning. We might have a chance. Varel didn't smile. Instead, she stepped to the doorway and sniffed again. Mason's grin faded. What is it now? Her voice dropped low. Something watches. Something watches. Varel's voice was like ice in the air. Mason froze. He looked toward the cracked shuttle entrance, but saw nothing, just white snow and gray stone. Are you sure? He whispered. Varel didn't answer. Her body was still, like a statue. Her glowing blue eyes locked on the jagged ridge across the valley. Then she moved, slowly, quietly. She placed her hand on the side of the shuttle, Tia, and leaned her head toward the wall. Mason watched. Heart, THUDDING. She was listening. After a few seconds, she turned to him. They are near. Too many footsteps. Spread wide. Circle pattern. More hunters. He asked. Yes, she replied, already gripping her spear. But smarter. Silent. They wait to trap. Mason swallowed hard. Then we need to run. Again. Varel shook. Her head? No more running. They used the wreck as a base. While Varel set up a defense, Mason activated the old shuttle's controls. The beacon was still alive, powered by a backup core. He boosted the signal, added a message. If anyone? Here's this. He spoke into the mic. I'm human scout Mason Lorne. We are under attack. Coordinates attached. Please help. Then he leaned back and waited outside. Varel worked like a warrior, preparing for her final fight. She sharpened both spears, strapped plates of metal from the shuttle to her arms and legs, and drew strange red lines on her face with mineral dust. War paint. Mason watched her, sitting beside the beacon. You think anyone will hear the call? He asked. Not in time, she said. He looked down. Then why send it? She paused, then looked at him. So someone remembers you, even if you fall. He stared at her. What about you? She gave him a small smile. No one is listening for me. The first arrow struck the shuttle's roof. At sunset, it hissed through the air and exploded in sparks, lighting the inside for a split second. Mason jumped to his feet. They're here. Varel didn't flinch. She stood, tall and ready. We hold the ground. Mason grabbed a shock pistol from the shuttle's emergency box. It only had 2 charges, not enough, but it was better than nothing. Varel stepped outside first. The snow crunched under her heavy boots from the shadows. Movement, dark shapes appeared, 6, maybe more. Hunters, cloaked in black armor, faces hidden behind smooth masks. They spoke in her tongue. Varel one said, loud and cold, "This is your last chance. Give up the human. Come home. Be judged." She raised her spear. I do not kneel. 2 liars. The hunter raised his weapon. So be it. The fight began in a flash. Blades clashed. Bolts of plasma lit the air. Snow turned black with ash. Varel moved like a storm, leaping, slamming, spinning. Her spear danced between enemies. She knocked 2 hunters off their feet with one swing. Mason fired his pistol, hitting a hunter in the chest. The charge sent the enemy flying into a rock wall. But more came. They moved like a pack, surrounding, pressing. Mason was pulled backward, nearly dragged down until Varel roared and tackled his attacker, crushing the hunter's mask with her fist. Stay behind me, she shouted. He did. But then she cried out. A blade cut across her side deep. Blue blood sprayed across the snow. She stumbled. No. Mason rushed forward. He fired the last pistol charge, hitting another hunter. But they kept coming. 3 left. VA was bleeding, her breath short, her stance weak. Then Mason saw it's his only chance. The shuttle, he ran. They shouted behind him, but he didn't stop. He reached the shuttle, dove inside, and yanked the fuel line from the emergency tank. He dragged it across the floor, tossing sparks from a tool belt onto the trail. One caught. Fire hissed through the line. Then, boom, the fuel ignited, flames shot out from the shuttle, engulfing the path. Hunters were thrown back by the blast. The air cracked with pressure. Silence followed. Mason crawled from the wreckage. Coughing, snowflakes fell again, landing on his burned jacket. He looked up. Varel was still standing. Wounded, but alive. She held her spear loosely, face pale. The last hunter stood across from her leader, older. Calm. He stared at her with something like respect. "You fought well," he said in her language, "but you are broken. You cannot win." She breathed hard. "I don't need to win," she said. "I only need to protect him." The hunter lunged, and Varel threw her spear. It pierced through his chest. He fell without a word. The silence returned. Mason limped toward her, arms shaking. "You did it?" he said. Varel dropped to one knee. He caught her before she hit the ground. Her voice was faint. "I cannot move." "You're losing too much blood," he said. "Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered. "I do not fear." The end. "Well, I do," he said firmly. "So don't go." She smiled faintly. "You are strange. For a small thing, and you're stubborn. For a giant." An hour passed. Then a sound came from the sky. Not a hunter, a real ship. Human lights blinked in the clouds. Scanning the valley, the beacon had worked. Mason looked up, tears in his eyes. "They found us," Varel whispered. "Then, maybe, we live." The human dropship touched down with a soft hiss. Snow swirled around the landing gear as its engines powered down. A ramp lowered, and men in white coats and armored suits came rushing out. Weapons raised, eyes sharp. Mason stood in front of the wrecked shuttle, hands up. "Don't shoot," he shouted. "We're not the enemy." They paused. One soldier stepped forward, blinking at the human man covered in blood, ash, and snow. "You're Mason Lorne." Mason nodded, pointing back. Over his shoulder, "She's hurt. She saved me. Please help her first." That's when they saw her. Varel lay on a blanket inside the wreck. Her huge body still, blood crusted along her side, armor cracked. The medics stopped in their tracks. One took a slow step forward, looking unsure. "She's not human," he said quietly. "I know," Mason replied. "She's better." The officer hesitated, then gave the order. "Treat her now." They took them both on board. Varel was sedated, her wounds sealed with foam and bioskin. Mason stayed beside her the entire flight. He held her hand, giant, heavy scarred, and whispered stories to keep her grounded. "You're gonna wake up," he said. "You'll see the stars again, I promise." 2 weeks later, Mason sat in a clean medical room on the orbital station. Staring out a round window at the planet below, it looked peaceful from space. Blue and white, quiet, hard to believe they almost died down there. The door behind him slid open. He turned. Varel entered. Slower than usual, her sides still stiff. Her armor had been replaced with loose clothing. And her long white cloak now had a patch with a human emblem. She looked awkward and unsure. "You're awake," Mason said, smiling wide. She nodded, still alive. They stood in silence for a few seconds, then she said, "They questioned me, long time." Mason frowned. "Did they treat you badly?" She shook her head. "No, just careful. Your people are cautious." He nodded. "They're scared of what they don't know." "I know," she said. I used to be the same. He stood. What now? Burrell looked toward the stars. I don't know. I have no home, no rank, no people. You have me. Her eyes met his. You are strange. He chuckled. I get that a lot. She looked down. They offered to send me to another world. Start fresh. He swallowed. Will you go? I said no. Mason blinked. Why? 'Cause I found something better. She stepped closer. You treated me like I mattered. Not as a weapon, not as a monster. I never saw you that way, he said. Then let me stay, with your people, or near them. Somewhere I am not hunted. Mason grinned. I'll talk. To the commander, for the next few weeks, things changed. The human officers gave her space. Slowly, they watched her help with repairs, offer advice, even teach a few guards how to fight with a spear. And they saw something else. She smiled more, laughed softly when Mason made bad jokes, helped a young medic reach a high shelf without asking. And just once Mason caught her standing still in the sun, eyes closed, like she was finally breathing free. A new living zone was built at the edge of the colony station. It was made for larger species just in case others ever visited. But everyone knew it was her home. Mason helped design it. A mix of alien stonework and human comforts. Big door, strong roof, open fire pit, soft furs. And in the back his favorite part, a hand-carved wall where new carvings began to appear. Stories, not of war, but of hope. One evening, Mason knocked. On her door, she opened it. Ducking slightly, he held out something in his hands. A small clay statue. It showed a tall warrior holding a smaller figure close. Both looking at the stars, VA stared at it. You made this? He nodded. Rough, I know. But I wanted to thank you. For what? For giving me something I never had. She tilted her head. A home, he said, and someone who sees me. Burrell reached out and took the statue with both hands. I will protect it, like I protect you. Quetsu, you all ready? That night, as the stars blinked outside, she sat beside him on the hill overlooking the colony. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Two souls from two. One small, one tall, but both. Finally safe and finally seen.